In our last class, we talked some about the theory data cycle, but we talked about it in more abstract terms. Today, we're going to talk about it in this video. We're going to talk about it in much more specific terms, and we'll give you some examples of how these things work. So first off, think about science as not a single brick, but a brick wall. So not just this one brick, this is one study, but we're going to be thinking about how all of these bricks come together, how all these studies come together, and how do they support each other, through a process of replication. What is the weight of the evidence? Does it support this hypothesis, this theory, or does it support something different? So we're going to be paying attention to that, as we're going through. The second thing here is that we are almost never 100% sure. So we start by making a guess or a hypothesis, and then really should be testing it. So initially, our initial hypothesis is count up by twos. But then when our sequence 10, 20, 30 still works, we decide maybe it needs to be refined more. Maybe it's counting up by multiples. And then when 100, 500, 894 work, where we conclude count up only by even numbers. So we're gathering different studies together. And then, lo and behold, 1, 9, and 20 still work, which means that maybe we need something different. Maybe just counting up works. So we test it. Let's try something different. 27, 13, 4. Does that work? And it doesn't. Okay, so it suggests that perhaps this other way of looking at things is more effective. And then we try it again, 55 to 999. It doesn't work. And we're 99% sure, but never 100%. Okay. Someone might bring in another piece of data that causes us to shift our hypothesis. So here's one example of how this might work. We have two theories about poverty that people have generally talked about: absolute deprivation, where it's just harmful to not have basic needs met. The relative deprivation model says it's harmful to feel poor relative to others. Okay? So the absolute deprivation model says, it's not having enough food. Relative deprivation says, if other people have enough food, but I don't have enough food. If other people have enough food and I don't, then it's a problem. So this is an article from an article by Nicholas Kristof summarizing Van Wolkenton's research. And I have a video posted of, just describing this, or an excerpt showing this. So Kristof says monkeys were taught in an experiment to hand over pebbles in exchange for cucumber slices. And they thought that was pretty cool. Pebbles, I'd prefer cucumbers. Then the researcher randomly chose one monkey inside of a second and offered them an even better deal: a grape for the pebble. Monkeys love grapes. I love grapes. So this monkey was thrilled. Then the researcher returned to the other monkey, gave them a cucumber for the pebble. So you see this monkey is watching the first monkey, or, they're watching each other. And the monkey sees this being given a cucumber when the other monkey got a pebble or got a grape as insulting. And so the monkey throws the cucumber back at the primatologist. It's worth watching the video. It's just funny. Now, as you're going through here, you're going to want to say, so what theories are being tested? And what's your hypothesis? And then draw a bar graph of the relative deprivation predictions and of the absolute deprivation theory predictions. And think about what theory is supported. Now, in doing so, you're going to get a much better picture of, much better understanding of the theory data cycle, and also a better understanding of science. So Robert Merton talks about the 4 scientific norms that undergird what we're talking about here. First off, scientists are disinterested. They're passionate about their work, but they're not putting their finger on the scale and saying, trying to make something fit. They're willing to weigh both sides of the coin. They're also skeptical. So there's frequently stopping and saying, so what is another way of looking at this? It's a good question to ask. Are there other explanations for our data? Are there other things that we might use to understand what we see here? This third piece, communality, what we're asking, or what scientists do, is they work together, publishing papers, reading each other's papers, commenting on them, arguing about them. And that's one of the strengths of science. And finally, universalism. So we're not saying this person is famous, therefore their work is better. What we are trying to do is say, what is the best test of this hypothesis? Does it test it well? Does the strength of the evidence support this? And we're looking at the evidence rather than the name. So scientists make their work public. And, we're interested in basic research. So how does the brain work? How is it activated by meditation? But most of us are also interested in applied research. We want not just to know what the brain does, but does this work to help children study better and longer, right? And so we start often with basic research and then move to translational research, where we're asking if it works in the lab, and then move to applied situations, because it may work in the lab, but not out in the real world. Now, as we said with Merton, what we're going to be doing is publishing this research, submitting it to a scientific journal. And, throughout the semester, we're going to be looking at a variety of different journal articles. From here, journalists look at some of the research that's published and They are asking, does this, what can I sell, right? Because in part, a journalist's job is to sell their research or sell a story. So part of what journalists do is get the research out there. That's a good thing. They may not always get it right. And that's something that we're going to be talking about over and over this semester. Are they getting it right? When are they getting it right? And when aren't they? So here's a simple example. Here are three different journalists publishing stories on a meta-analysis by Cipriani et al. And they are arguing, the first one says it's not quackery, antidepressants work, period. Second one says antidepressants are not snake oil or a conspiracy, they work. And the final one, do antidepressants work? And you might stop and think about which of the three here would a psychologist or other scientist like best, and why? Now, science studies don't prove theories, they support them, right? Remember that brick in the wall. And so asking, do antidepressants work, is certainly the best story that a psychologist would want a journalist to tell. So here they're reporting that Andrea Cipriani et al. Conducted a meta-analysis of 522 clinical studies looking at 21 antidepressants. They conclude that all depressants were more effective than placebos. Good news. But the benefits compared to placebo were mostly moderate or modest. So what we're seeing down here, and we'll talk about effect sizes more at the end of the semester, they found an effect size of 0.3, which is more towards the small end. Not something that you're going to be like really excited about. Now, this is relative to placebos, and we'll probably talk more about placebos over the course of the semester, and also why we're comparing them to placebos. So those are some of the kinds of questions that you should be asking yourself at this point and think about how to respond. So I'm going to stop here. Take care, and I'll see you in our next video. Bye-bye.